needs to secure something that may be an inherent weakness in a system or a process. An example would be modern day. Believe it or not, there's still places that have people use their social security number for a username, which today's culture, that should not be the case. But believe it or not, there are well known, I'm not going to name names, excuse me, businesses and entities that use social security numbers for a username. And a username generally is not secure at all on a form, a web form. Passwords are, but usernames aren't. And so you can imagine the nightmare that could create. But that's just one example of multiple that we could think of. We'll talk about tonight. So it's a multifaceted approach to information security would be how to control these risks through managing things differently, developing some type of security policy, from internet security policy, door access security policy, password security policy, just to name a few. And then awareness and training. I think we kind of skim over awareness and training and be like, oh yeah, we know about it. Oh yeah, we got it. But we don't. And so people say they understand what a secure password is, but they still use a weak one. People understand what door access security is, or proximity card security is, but they still share their proximity cards with other people, still share passwords with other people. We get it, right? You get it. It's everywhere. It's people say they get it, but I guess convenience outweighs security a lot of times. And so security kind of goes by the wayside. Threat is basically a type of action that could cause potential harm. So a threat could be, could your web server be attacked and passwords be stolen, credit card information be stolen, customer database be stolen. Threat agent would be the person or entity attacking the threat. And so it could be that person or that entity or that code or software that carries out the threat. Vulnerability will be a flaw or weakness in a system, software, or a process to bypass security. So it's no good to really have everybody's proximity card to go in the door if everybody's sharing proximity cards with each other or guests or whatever, right? Doesn't really do any good to have proximity cards if that's the case. Risk, likelihood that a threat agent will exploit that vulnerability. So if you think about it for a second, there's probably millions of vulnerabilities in the world today in technology. And what if those vulnerabilities were attacked tonight, every one of them? What could happen? Could the infrastructure of cities be taken down? Lights, cameras, street lights, stoplights, disaster recovery communication. Could all that be taken down? Emergency communication, if all these vulnerabilities were attacked tonight? Technically, we hope. Yeah, like you said, we hope not. But more than likely, if these vulnerabilities were attacked, we know they're out there. They could cause some problems. And until attack happens, a lot of times we don't do anything, right? As Americans or as people in general. And so we just kind of think, well, everything's good, everything's great, everything's wonderful. But then when something happens, we're like, okay, what did we do wrong? What did we not see? What was a weakness in the security process here? We all think back to 9/11 when we think of that. We think back to multiple instances, present day Iran, what's going on there? What's going on? Is there weaknesses and flaws? We all know there are. It's a kind of a rhetorical question. But if you think about it, you can take it to the nth degree, really. You can really get freaky and paranoid about it because of all the different vulnerabilities that could be out there. And there are vulnerabilities that can in, like, say, the big cities like Chicago, New York, to where if the electrical grid was attacked, it would take down the entire infrastructure of a city. And those type of attacks, by the way, have been thwarted over the years. But who's to say those vulnerabilities are 100% patched and not there anymore? Same thing we could say with airports. Are they 100% unvulnerable now or impenetrable now since 9/11? Can people still get in? I think there's been a number of reports since then of reporters going in, doing the very same thing that was done pre 9/11 by getting a badge, going in this door, going in that door. Even some, I believe, one person I heard even guised himself as a pilot and was in the co-pilot seat before he said, "Hang on just a second, I'm a reporter, I'm not a pilot." And so that's pretty scary. And this person's not a, technical person, just figured out how to do it. And so we all know the vulnerabilities are there. And so we're going to talk tonight ways to control that. Risk, which basically is a likelihood that a threat agent will exploit a vulnerability. So we've got a couple classifications, in fact, 6 of them. Strategic, compliance, financial, operational, environmental, technical, and managerial. Strategic risk classification would be an action that affects long-term goals, like the theft of intellectual property, not pursuing a new opportunity, loss of a major account, competitor entering the market. Compliance, following a regulation or standard. Example of a classification here of a risk would be breach of contract, not responding to introduction of new laws or ignoring them. Financial, impact of financial decisions. Example, increasing interest rates, global financial crisis. Operational, events that impact the daily business of an organization. Example, fire, hazardous chemical spill, power blackout. Technical, events that affect information technology systems, like denial of service attacks, SQL injection attack, viruses. And then lastly, managerial, actions that are related to the management organization, like a long-term illness of a company president or a key employee resigning. These are all risk classifications that can fall in any business or number of businesses throughout the world, or any type of entity or group. So privilege is another term we're going to talk about, which is basically how somebody accesses a certain level over an object, such as a file, how they get access to a file. Should everybody see every file on the network? Should everybody be able to open up every file? Should everybody be able to edit every file? No. And so there's privileges that allow us to control that. Privilege management is the task of assigning and revoking privileges, which really in a large organization or even medium organization is a pretty good chunk of time of somebody in that organization to do that. And it's not generally automated. It's generally somebody has to manually do these things. An example would be somebody, a VP quits. What's the process? Is the network credentials revoked? Is their phone taken? Their laptop taken? Is their proximity card taken? And if so, at what time during that process is it taken? So a lot of businesses today in IT anyway, or high security, when a person quits, they're not allowed to go back to their cubicle. They're sent home. Or they're fired, they're sent home. The reason for that is, as you can probably guess, if they went back to their cubicle, they could do some damage possibly and still have rights to the network, whatever. They could steal something. They could cause bodily harm to someone, physical harm. So it's best, a lot of cases, companies today, when they fire somebody or somebody quits, they're escorted out the door and then told the next day they can pick up their stuff in a box or whatever at the front door, which is a pretty common practice for a lot of companies, just to save mitigation and issues. But a lot of companies don't have that. Somebody quits or they're fired and there's no rule set in place. And so Joe's just kind of walking around like a ticking time bomb that afternoon, and which isn't a good situation. We maybe have all been there before, possibly, with people. Yeah.
Sony would like to hide it, but Sony, wasn't there something like that where they got some privileges, the brands, and they found out how to get into Sony's system?
Yeah, you're right. You're
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so, again, that can be handled with proper procedures and management. But, well, that's an issue that has to be dealt with. Privilege auditing is basically where you periodically review somebody's privileges and say, or a group's privileges like marketing, HR, and say, hey, do they have the correct rights? Do they have too many rights? An example would be maybe eons ago, marketing did some pseudo function in HR, like say maybe helping them process checks or something. I don't know, because they're marketing, they helped them put it together or whatever. Well, that was like 10 years ago. Marketing doesn't do that at all now, but they still have rights to payroll folders and payroll database or whatever. That's probably not good. And so a simple audit would help solve that. Now, in an audit like this, who would you have to have in that audit to actually help? Or could IT do it by itself? Who would we have to have? If we're talking about the HR marketing scenario, who would be good to have in that group to audit, in that audit meeting, I guess? Yeah, HR would be good, right? For sure. Well, was like HR manager, right? HR assistant, somebody who knows what they're doing. What about marketing? Would be good to have somebody in leadership there to say, yeah, we used to do that 10 years ago, but we haven't done that in 10 years or whatever. We really don't need that. And, uh, if, you have access to something, you can't have plausible deniability of that something. So it's better to have it out of sight, out of mind, and out of control or access, or the temptation of accessing it. So the objective here is to determine if somebody, a subject, or a group of people has the correct privileges and making those changes. We've all seen stuff like this, user rights, where basically you come in and get hired and you're told, okay, you have rights to log in from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can access these folders and these drives, and you're maybe verbally told that. But there should be some type of written document reviewing those rights, and the user has to sign off on it, and they know what's going on. But here's a basic, a sample user access and rights review. I won't read all of it. I'll highlight some of it. Like it says here on number 1, the IT security manager will generate a list of users by application. The appropriate list will be sent to the owner of the application, who will then confirm, hey, who amongst this list needs access to this still, and who doesn't. Then the IT security assures a response is received within so many business days. Any user that's not confirmed will have their system disabled immediately within 3 business or within 3 and deleted within 3 business days. Then the IT security manager will maintain a permanent record of that list, when it was distributed, to whom, and when they replied, and what actions were taken. So that list can be maintained in a database, probably, to be pulled up, and some trail or audit trail needs to be in place. Because if you don't have audit trails like this in place, you're really just trusting people, which isn't a bad trait, especially if they're a trustworthy person. You're trusting people versus a process. And what happens when you trust people blindly and don't have a process written down? What can happen? Yeah, so you're a trustworthy person. I trust you with this job. You do a great job, but then you get a better job and you give your notice and leave. The next person comes in and goes, I'm not doing it that way. I'm not doing that. That's a waste of my time. I'm not doing that anymore. And so when no procedures are in place, it's the onus is upon the person that's doing the job, in this case, accessing user rights. So controlling risk would be basically looking at a change of some type in the network or in the business and say, okay, what do we do when employee A moves to department B? What change management happens? So there has to be some key management changes, physical keys, or audits of their proximity card, audits of their security on the network. So two major types of changes need to be documented. Changes you make to the system itself. So when you're adding or taking away hardware, or even settings. And then changes you make to a file or document classification. And so those two things, like if you get a review by your boss, they update the piece of paperwork they fill out, that gets put in your file, but also is documented electronically too, to have a paper trail, an audit trail. Change management team is just the people that manages that function, and their duties are to ensure the risk and impact of planned changes are understood. Now, because of my voice, I'm going to forward fast to the risk identification stuff. Yeah, right there. So what is the security policy? Thursday, you're going to be looking at the security policy for username and passwords here on campus. Is there such a creature that you know of as a student? You'll find out if there is. I'm not going to tell you there is. It's your job to find out if you can find one, a security policy. So a security policy basically outlines minimal risk in an organization and how to attack those. So there's higher level definition, which basically is set by management that defines how to safeguard information. Lower level would be like rules for who has access to computers and how they're carried out. An example would be people aren't allowed to be on the network after 5:30. Well, networking wise, you could set that rule in a network server to just don't allow people to log in after 5:30, and they can log in after 8:30 in the morning. Security policy documents basically just provide the verbiage for that security policy and functions and how they should be carried out. So 3 approaches to the security policy when it comes to trust is trust everyone all the time, trust no one at any time, trust some people some of the time. So security policy attempts to provide the right amount of trust, and at times it needs to be changed. The level of control must also be balanced in the fact that it can be influenced by the needs of the organization and culture. So maybe it worked 10 years ago to clock in manually with an old-fashioned time clock. Anybody remember those? Time card, pick it off the wall, stamp it in. We've all probably worked jobs like that. But we got so many employees now, it's becoming cumbersome for not only them, but the HR and the managers to go through all those time cards. And so maybe it's a good time to invest in proximity cards and proximity card readers to make things much more efficient and effective and more streamlined for the employees and also for HR and payroll. There's also things like standards, which I won't read, guidelines, policies that goes into security policies, and some characteristics. Out of this list, the most important would be communication of that policy to everybody, that they understand what that policy is. So this is referring to Thursday, what you're going to be doing. You'll be, the first phase in security policy cycle is vulnerability assessment. You really can't make a policy until you know what's vulnerable. So vulnerability assessment looks at all the assets, threats, does an appraisal, a risk assessment, and risk mitigation. Then, after the vulnerability assessment is done, you create a policy to attack or to fix or manage that risk, and then you review it for compliance. Laws, you definitely don't want to break any laws with it. And so Thursday we're going to go over the first part, which is vulnerability assessment. And it's a cycle, basically, a continual cycle that organizations do or should do on a yearly basis in their IT department and other departments as well, to make sure things are up to date, secure as best, to get things done. So Thursday when you guys come in, we're actually going to go step by step on this slide. We're going to talk about what an asset identification is, threat identification, vulnerability appraisal, assessment, and risk mitigation. Okay, so we'll do that Thursday. Hope my voice will be better then. And but that's it for tonight, and I will see everybody Thursday. Thanks for putting up with my crackly voice. I know it's annoying.